68. About superstition. April 16th, 1847. A third kind of so-called visions is the most stupid, superstitious assumption brought over from paganism, according to which certain quite natural phenomena are supposed to have some prophetic connection with a fact that is therefore supposed to happen in the future. I have already said many things in this regard on another occasion, but because this matter not infrequently gives rise to the greatest silliness and resulting malice, its dreadfulness should once again be presented here in the right place. It cannot be unknown to you to which exceedingly and quite incomprehensibly stupid manipulations some people take their resort, in order to pinch something out of the sorrowful future, of course, quite erroneously. The first fools of this are the calendar makers, who, without possessing an ounce of wisdom, predict the weather for every day in the most ridiculous way in the world. Some of them date it according to certain extremely ludicrous and exceedingly ridiculous so-called loose days. What can such a loose day do if good or bad weather occurs after it? O donkey-like people of the earth, who is the master of the weather? I or the loose stag? Or can someone think that I am so unwise and stupid that I have created certain days in the year only for the sake of future weather? Or did it not rain, thunder and lightning, hail and snow already at the time when people did not yet know anything about a merry, light measure days, of the 40 martyrs, of Midadi, of Margaretha, and of Portiuncula? Who first made these days, pro primo, certain feast days? The stupidity of the people. And who afterwards made them feast days? The very excessive stupidity of the people. But do not these days resemble the divination of signs of the Gentiles and Jews, to whom I said how they can recognize from the setting and rising sun what kind of day will follow? And I said to them, you perverse kind, you can judge the signs of the sky, but the signs of this time, the signs that I worked before your eyes, you do not recognize. What I said then, I say now. People judge the loose days and deduct from them the future weather. But they do not know the great loose day of their heart, which would reveal to them the main weather of their future eternal life. But man would only act rightly if he paid more attention to the weather conditions of his heart and realized that there is always bad weather in it, which certainly comes from the frequent loose days, which are play days, feast days, booze days, and almost all whore days, then no good days, hard-hearted days, honour-cutting days, and a lot of other such lousy, loose days. These loose days shall man take into account. Then many a foolish storm, lightning, thunder, rain, and hail snow and ice of his heart shall cease. And if such storms and evil tempests shall cease in the heart, then the spirit would dare to step out of its closet into the free world of the heart, and would proclaim to the soul the loose days of eternal life. But as long as all kinds of evil storms rage in the heart, which originate from the evil miserable days, the spirit remains in its chamber, and person remains what he was, only a despicable animal, which will hardly ever be accepted into the heavenly circle of animals. So man should pay attention to the feast days on which the weather of the heart depends. But Candlemas, 40 Martyrs, Margaret, Portiuncula and Medadi, they are nobody's business, because I make the weather of the world without Candlemas, Portiuncula and Medadi. There are also calendar manufacturers who predict their weather in another way. They calculate like this: the winter is so long, the spring so long, the summer just so long, and the autumn just so long. In the winter we set 16 times snow, namely at the times in which, according to experience, it has otherwise always snowed. In the summer we have about 20 thunderstorms, and some rain, heat, and sometimes winds. In the autumn we have 2 thunderstorms, then cold winds, rain, frost, and finally some snow. That means nevertheless right. Quia mundus vult decipi, ergo decipiatur. Because the world wants to be deceived, so be it. But I would not say anything to such stupidities, because they do not originate from a silly reason, but exactly because they are a fraud. So it cannot be the same to me whether such stupid weather prophecies are announced to the people by the calendars or not, by which proclamation the people is diverted in their faith from me, and is led over to the stupid calendar faith. For there are people who believe the calendar so firmly that if it indicates a weather, it must come so surely that even I would not be able to change it. What kind of fruit is this? Again, there are other people who consider the calendar makers to be either a kind of demigods, or a kind of sorcerers, or at least black artists, who are in a laudable connection with a certain Beelzebub, or witch, who predict the weather for every day to the calendar makers, if the latter have committed their souls to them. That is again a marvellous fruit, which drives mankind instead of upward to the light, straight downward to darkness. So the calendar makers should put into their calendars what they can vouch for with their science and with their conscience. But with such popular weather indications, they should stay at home. And because in this respect they are already so attached to the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans, and their interpretation of signs seems to them to be historically ancient and sublime, they should also memorize quite deeply the Roman moral saying, which is not bad at all, and which says, Quot licet Jovi, non licet bovi. That is to say, The ox should not take over the business that God alone has reserved for himself, especially not as long as he is and remains a purely carnal ox. I put to shame the barometers, which are more closely connected with the atmospheric air than the spirit of a calendar maker together with his calendar. How much more is the calendar maker together with his calendar disgraced? Especially if he is so stupid to prophesy beautiful Easter vacations, and I then make them white. This weather prediction is followed by a lot of folly under the title Antidotes for the Weather, or means by which one can drive away either thunderstorms predicted in the calendars, or if it is already really approaching. Among these means of driving away the weather are, primo loco, the so-called weather fairs in Roman Christendom. If parish priests want to be paid for a lot of weather fairs, they are only allowed to make an amicable agreement with a calendar maker or other weather prophet, so that he can prophesy a lot of lightning and hail, and then there will be a lot of weather fairs. A second remedy is the so-called blessing of the field, either by the local clergy, which is of course not so powerful, or by a mendicant monk, whose blessing is said to be much more powerful. As a third antidote, especially against already approaching thunderstorms, is mainly the so-called weather rigging, which is just now very much in momentum again. Then the shooting with consecrated powder, then the smoking with the so-called palm willows, the burning of consecrated candles, the hanging out of the real Tobias blessing, the sprinkling of the fields with holy water, and finally, in addition to some even meaner follies, the erection of tremendously high, red-painted weather crosses, on which the weather witches are supposed to bump into each other and then fall down. What horrible nonsense! But all this comes mainly from the weather prophets, who themselves are considered to be a kind of sorcerer, through which the common man completely gets away from considering God to be the weather maker, and to ask him for a good weather. But he now considers the weather to be purely a sorcerer's work, which he has to counteract only with the anti-hexical means. And then one wedge drives the other, and one foolishness the other, but usually under the title Omni ad majorem Dei Gloria. For this honour, however, I give thanks. It may have once been pleasing to the brass, stone, and wooden gods, and may still be pleasing to the wooden, bronze, here and there also stone, and mostly painted images of saints. But I create nothing out of such glorification. Behold, all this also belongs to the realm of visions, but certainly to the dirtiest, and has as much reality as the pocket skills of a physically very nimble person. However, this kind of vision has the very significant disadvantage that mankind, which is still better in its heart, is completely diverted from trusting in God, and in the end puts all its trust in the calendars, in the weather measurements, in the weather ringing, and so on. And this is an effect of hell, then, which in this way takes possession of the minds, not only of individual people, but of whole peoples in the most shameful way, and has not infrequently tempted them to the most shameful degenerations against their poor innocent brethren, and has tempted them especially in former times. And it is just about to happen again, if it would be possible to do it. For there are already witchery again, which are tolerated by the clergy. But I will soon get fed up with them. One should give light to a people, but not darkness. But one gives them darkness. Go ahead. But in due time, I myself will light a light for the people, and they will then know how to thank the givers of darkness duly.